If you are receiving this transmission, you are the resistance.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I was supposed to plug last segment, and this is like our biggest problem, is that we're so obsessed with bringing you the news. Like, we're so obsessed at getting the information out, we don't even take care of ourselves. We don't even plug. And I was supposed to plug last segment, and I completely forgot. But we're in a time right now where there's a brief window before Facebook and Twitter launch their new censorship programs to totally shut InfoWars out from the public platform that is Facebook and Twitter. And then, of course, Google and YouTube have their own algorithms. But Facebook and Twitter have announced new terms of service that are about to be implemented that were specifically designed to target InfoWars and to keep us down. And so, just as important as it is for your financial support so that we can continue to expand, hire more crew, get more guests, get more hosts, get more reporters, get more cameramen, get more editors, the whole nine, get more people overseas. You wrote to Alex today. He wants to go worldwide, satellites around the world for broadcasting. So your support at InfoWarsStore.com is obviously imperative. We could fund this entire operation if everybody listening to today's show, from David Knight's show to Alex Jones' show to the War Room here, if everyone listening bought a bottle of toothpaste, Super Blue fluoride-free toothpaste, even for 50% off at InfoWarsStore.com, if everyone just bought a bottle of toothpaste, a product that you use, everyone uses toothpaste. If everyone that listened to InfoWars Live today, from the Real News with David Knight, the Alex Jones Show to the War Room, if everyone purchased a bottle of Super Blue fluoride-free toothpaste, we could fund this operation if everybody just used that. But that's one aspect. Right now, we need you to share the links and spread this information because they're about to totally silence us on social media, folks. So you have a brief window where you can plug us and pump us out there where they're just kind of 60 to 70% censoring us before they roll out the 95% censorship of us. So force us out on these platforms before they silence us, so then people will realize that we were silenced. You see, if InfoWars is all over people's news feeds and then it disappears the next day, people are going to notice that and they're going to ask why. So please spread these links. Tell your friends and family about this broadcast because they're trying to shut us down. And we're going to continue to expand. We're not going to back down, but we need your support and we need you to tell friends and family about us so that we can continue to expand. Now, part of the reason why they want to shut us down is because we hear all sides of the argument. We don't just go along with the status quo. In fact, I kind of tongue-in-cheek said I'm making fun of all the genders that people talk about now. I'm a contrarian gender, whereas I'm just going to be contrary to whatever it is you're saying. Just total contrarian. That's my gender from now on. But my point is where I have Laura Loomer on earlier this week to talk about her view of what's going on in the Gaza Strip. Now I'm going to bring on Syrian Girl, who has a totally different view. And here's my thing. And this is the saddest part about this to me, and why I think I always grew up trying to avoid religion and politics, is because it just divides people. And I can't even report on this issue from a neutral perspective. It's like you are either full-on support Israel or you're full-on anti-Semite. It's like you can't, it's like, can I just, my job is to do play-by-play of things that are happening and do the commentary on them. I'm not trying to go side by side here with Israel or Palestine. Okay, I'm an American. And whatever it is that America is involved with over there is probably not America First policy, but that's a separate issue. Now, I was hoping we could get Laura Loomer on as well with Syrian Girl so we could have a live spirited debate here on air, but we were unable to hear back from Laura. But Syrian Girl does join me here now. So first, I just want to give you the platform, okay, for you to just get whatever it is you think is going on or whatever the subjects that you want to discuss. And then I have some questions for you that we can go back and forth on. But the main story is, okay, the embassy gets moved to Jerusalem. You have a big ribbon-cutting ceremony. Why did they have to do that? Seems unnecessary. Then you have the protests in the Gaza Strip. Then you have the IDF killing people. Then you have Hamas saying they're terrorists. okay, well, why should I trust Hamas? And why would Hamas admit, it makes no sense for Hamas to admit that their terrorists were killed when that gives the narrative to Israel. So that doesn't even make sense to me. So where do you stand on all this? What do you think are the real issues here going on in the Gaza Strip?
Well, first of all, saying that being against Israel is anti-Semitic is the same as saying being against ISIS is Islamophobic. Why would Hamas come out and say these things? If you were paying attention to Ron Paul's statements to Congress, you would know that Israel created Hamas. In fact, this is common knowledge. WikiLeaks reported on this. The Washington Post reported on this. Basically, Israel created Hamas because at the time, there was a secular, nationalist, anti-religious resistance movement of Palestinians who just wanted their country back and wanted to be treated like equal citizens that they wanted to destroy. And how better to destroy that than to support and fund the Islamists? That's just basically the strategy that they use everywhere, like they used in Syria, like they used in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Well, they use that. They do that in America. There was a Project Veritas video that catches a Democrat Party operative talk about putting people out in the streets during the protests there to start violence too. So this is a typical tactic. You insert violent people into these legitimate protests to start violence and then make the protest illegitimate. Classic technique.
Well, here's the thing. Hamas didn't organize the protest. If you were to listen to the news, that's what you would be thinking. Of course, Hamas came in later and said, oh, we endorsed this. And it doesn't matter that 10 other people endorsed it. That's what the headlines say, because, of course, Hamas was created in order to provide Israel an excuse to ethnically cleanse and steal land. The point is, it doesn't really matter about this protest. This protest is it comes in a much larger context. And the larger context is what we need to be talking about. We don't need to be talking about whether it's peaceful or not peaceful, because at the end of the day, what we need to be talking about is the fact that Israel has no right to exist. Israel has no right to defend itself, because Israel is basically the Jewish ISIS. Israel is the Jewish state in the Levant. It was created using terrorism, illegal immigration, and why? Because they have this religious belief that they belong in the Middle East. Even though they come from everywhere from around the world. It's the same as ISIS. They have this religious belief that need to take over Syria and Iraq and bomb the world because they think that the God says that it's okay. They basically follow what's in their religious book. And the problem is that not all Jews and not all Muslims agree with ISIS, and certainly not all Jews agree with Zionism. Certainly not all Christians agree with Zionism, especially the Christians in Palestine who are being ethnically cleansed by the Jewish state in the Levant. This idea that Israel is helping to fight terrorism, or like is saving Christianity. The Middle East Christians are crying out for people to hear them, to see how they're being destroyed.
All right. We're going to hold it right there. We got to go to break here. And I at least give you credit because you're willing to say what most people on your side of the aisle won't say. Israel shouldn't exist. And I think that there's a lot of people in the Middle East that would agree. And if Israel didn't have America protecting it, it would be wiped off the map. So we're going to have this debate on the other side. Syrian Girl joins me. This is the War Room. Don't go anywhere. Syrian Girl is my guest for at least one more segment, perhaps till the end of the hour. We're talking about the tensions in the Middle East, specifically at the Gaza Strip, and what happened where the IDF killed, I think it was 60 people, some of them men in wheelchairs, some of them children, I believe, too. And then the narrative magically the next day comes out of Hamas saying that 50 of them were Hamas agents. Right, because Hamas would want to admit that to give the narrative back to Israel. That doesn't make any sense. Regardless, though, before I get back into that, I just want to point something out here that I think is the larger issue from my perspective as an American to how we need to deal with this to figure out a lot of this confusion and a lot of this geopolitical strife. Now, the story comes out of the Wall Street Journal, timely, I believe, today. U.S. has spent $2.8 trillion on terrorism fight. Now, first sentence, the U.S. has spent as much as $2.8 trillion on the fight against terrorism since September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks, according to a study published Wednesday. Now, This is what really ramped up our involvement in the war on terror. Now, have we been in other wars in the Middle East? Have we always been shoulder to shoulder with Israel in their foreign affairs? Yes, I'm not denying that. But as far as what really got the public outcry and the real war on terror started, it was September 11th, 2001. Now, we have been lied to about September 11th, 2001. What really happened that day? I'm not going to tell you that I know what happened, but I can tell you that the official narrative we've been given is a total lie. Guaranteed, and it'll all be declassified probably in about 25 years, just like JFK assassination papers were. So we'll find out who was really behind September 11th. Some people say the Jews, some people say the Saudis, some people say American inside job. Who knows? Maybe it's all three of them. The point is, we were lied to about that. We spent $2.8 trillion fighting terror, and we were told that it was Islamic terrorists that wanted to kill us and wanted to attack our way of life and wanted to infiltrate this country and blow us up. Okay, so that's the narrative we're given on September 11th, but then magically in 2018, we have to bring in the Muslims and be tolerant of them and love them, even though we're told that they want to kill us and blow us up at the same time. So none of it makes sense. We need to find out the truth about 9/11 if we ever want to sort any of this out, in my opinion. But let's get back into the conflict in the Gaza Strip with Syrian Girl. Now, you said on the last side that you don't believe Israel has a right to exist. Now, I have to disagree with you on this because to me, this is like the same logic as saying America doesn't have the right to exist because we stole land from the Native Americans, or Peru doesn't have the right to exist because they stole their land from the Spaniards, stole it from the Native Americans, or it goes on and on. So you can always use that. Well, guess what?
Sure.
Israel does exist now, and I think that there's people in Israel that deserve the right to live. And you will admit, if America didn't have Israel's back, they would be wiped off the map by the other countries in Israel. So you're saying you're okay with that, and that's your stance. I want you to, I interrupted with the break last time, so go on.
No, the thing is, when we say Israel has no right to exist, we don't mean that every single person in Israel should be murdered or Israel should be wiped off the map, as you say.
But that's what would happen, though. Israel would be wiped off the map. Absolutely it would.
Here's what we're saying. We're saying that Israel needs to stop being a Jewish state. Now, they pretend to be secular, but they're basically ISIS with lipstick on. They call themselves the Jewish state, which means only Jews from all over the world can immigrate there. The Palestinians who live there are being ethnically cleansed because they happen to not be Jewish, and the people who are Palestinian, who are refugees around the world and have no state because of that, they don't have the right to return to their homes that were taken off them since the beginning of time. They still occupy Syrian land, and for this moment, 40 years, Syrian people in the Golan Heights, they cannot go back to their country. So what we're saying is, in order to make an alliance with Israel, and Syria has said this all along, in order to make an alliance with Israel, all they have to do is no longer be a Jewish state only and be a secular state for everybody. That's what we say, when Israel has no right to exist, it has no right to exist like ISIS has no right to exist. Because the premise of ISIS is this land belongs to the Wahhabi Muslims and nobody else.
Okay, but let's stop there. Let's stay on one train of thought for a second here because I want to focus on this. Okay, so I agree with you. The more I study Netanyahu and follow Netanyahu, the more I realize that guy is a rat and he needs to be removed from power. He ought to step down. He's been in power for a quarter of a century. I think he should step down. But he is the leader of Israel. Okay. But he is the leader of Israel, and he's the one that controls the narrative coming out of the state of Israel when he does some fake deal about Iran's nuclear regime with a bunch of compact discs, some weird revelation deal. But what do these people want? This is what confuses me. So you got the protesters that go out to the Gaza Strip. You got people that say they want Israel to open up its borders to become, free for all people, not just Jews.
No.
But why? What do people want out of Israel? Why do these people want to go to Israel? What do these people want from the Gaza Strip?
I don't know what people want, but basically what people want is their land back. At the start of your segment, you said, give me liberty or give me death.
But what does that mean? What does that mean? Hold on a second. No. What does that mean? They want their land back. So what? They want to just literally take the land and start building things? I mean, what does that mean?
No, they want to be able to walk home and open the door to their house, which they still have the key in, because Israel was only created 50 years ago, and those homes that they have, their ancestors' homes, are still there, and they just want the right to be able to go there. The people in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, which is completely occupied by Israel, they're continuously building these illegal settlements and encroaching on people's land. They're throwing rocks at people. Those people, they can't go to their beach. Palestine had a beautiful beach. They could see their family members. When Israel was created, it created a line, a border that divided families, that prevented people from crossing into their territory and seeing their country. Imagine if someone drew a line.
What people? What people?
The Zionists. The Zionists. When
No. But the Zionists would be allowed in Israel. Who's not being allowed into Israel?
The Palestinian people and the Syrian people are not being allowed into the Golan Heights. Now, for example, Israel forbids Gaza's Christians from going to Jerusalem for Easter prayers. This is what happened after Trump created Jerusalem. The Christians in Gaza are not allowed, which are Palestinian, are not allowed to go to Jerusalem, which the United Nations recognizes as a Palestinian territory, or at least it's like not supposed to be. The UN says Israel is not supposed to be Jerusalem is not supposed to be for Jews only. It's supposed to be a
Okay. But hold on a second. Let me just no. Hold on. Let me play devil's advocate here, because
sure.
Do you not admit that the hatred for Jewish people is real and that attacks on Jewish people are real? I mean, do Jewish people not have the right to have anywhere to go in peace in the Middle East?
How many attacks against Jews in America has there been? Of course, there.
Well, no. That's totally irrelevant. And actually, there's been a lot of them in New York City. No.
Okay,
there have been a lot of attacks on Jewish people, actually.
Attacks against Muslims. Does that mean that?
I agree with you. I never said that that's not. I never said that's not happening. But I'm talking about one specific instance here. Do Jewish people not have the right to exist in peace in the Middle East?
Of course, they have a right to exist in peace.
Well, then what would happen if the Israel borders got shut down?
Well, Israel borders. I'm sorry.
If Israel's borders got shut down, would the Jews have anywhere to be in peace in the Middle East?
I don't understand why Israel's borders are shut down. We're not calling for that.
I'm saying
what we're saying
if
is
they
that
were shut down.
no longer needs to be a place where it's only Jews, and they need to give the land of the people. They need to treat Palestinians. I'm talking one state solution here. One state, secular state for Christians and Muslims that live in Israel.
I think that I would agree with you in principle. I would agree with you in principle, but it's not possible. They can't live in. These people can't live in harmony over there. We got another segment. Let's one more segment with Syrian Girl. We're going to continue to debate this. So there's all types of issues we're dealing with here, and it's very confusing, very convoluted. The issues run deep. There's a lot of different opinions, a lot of different angles. Here's my biggest thing. I just don't see. I understand in principle why you would say Israel should be a secular state, and everybody should have the right to live there in peace and to do, their own religion, raise families, whatever. But I just don't think that's possible right now. That's just not possible to me.
Well, okay, let's leave that existential question aside for a minute. You talk about protecting the Jewish people. What about protecting the Christian Palestinian people who have lived there for centuries, who Israel doesn't allow to worship in Jerusalem because, now that Trump has said that Jerusalem belongs to Israel, they're forbidding Gaza Christians from going to Jerusalem to celebrate Easter. When Palestinian Christians dare to hold up a Palestinian flag at Palm Sunday, the Israeli police come in and they break up the crowd and they beat everyone up. What about the Christians? There was a Christian at this great march, the one that they tell us that Hamas created. There was a priest that went there. What about their rights? Now, if we're going to talk about Israel, this idea that Israel is helping America fight terrorism, well, let's talk about that. Israel has been giving medical aid to Al-Qaeda in Syria.
Hold on. I don't want to. No. Stop right there. I don't want to waste time with this. America funds terror. Israel funds terror. No. That's not what I'm here to talk about. We're not disagreeing on this. Look. Here's all I'm saying. We have a situation right now. But that's old news. Israel funds terror. America funds terror. All of these people fund terror. Iran funds terror. They all fund terror. They all hate each other. But like this. Let me ask you this. This is a real thing that I'm trying to understand here. What again? What? So I don't want Israel to be expansionist. I don't want Israel to colonize more land and keep invading Palestine. Okay, so that needs to stop.
Do you want Palestine to have its own state then? Because that's something that Israel doesn't agree with.
I would say Palestine should be able to have its own state, just like Israel should have its own state. I would say that, yes.
Okay. Here's the problem with your idea. The way that the Sykes-Picot or the British in 1948, when they listened to the illegal immigrants, Zionists that entered the Middle East and decided to have their ethnocentric religious state there, they divided it in such a way that basically the Gaza Strip and the West Bank are completely not able to connect with each other. The problem with it is that 15% of people inside this Israel are Palestinian. You know, the problem is that the way that it's designed is such that now that there's like most of the West Bank has Israeli settlements in there, it's sort of like there's no possible way anymore that you can have two states. You can only have one state. So you have a choice now. You can agree to have one secular state where Christians can live in peace, and Muslims and Jews as well, that live there already, and have it to be a secular state, or you can agree with ethnically cleansing everyone who isn't Jewish. Now, you say that, you know, the fact that Israel funds terrorism is not a big deal. That is the crux of this whole entire situation.
No. That's not what I said. I'm saying that every country funds terrorism. So you can use that argument against pretty much any country in Europe, America, Israel, Iran.
We're talking about ISIS and Al-Qaeda. This is a global terrorist organization that's been killing everyone around the world, including in America. We're not talking about a militia.
Okay, let me ask you this. All right, just let me ask you this. Okay, let's say America says, Israel, you're on your own. All right, you're on your own. You're gonna have to deal with these issues. And then what do you think? What do you think would happen?
Then they'll finally be able to negotiate with Syria, give Syria its territory back, and stop stealing its oil. At the moment, in the Golan Heights, where they're supporting Al-Qaeda and ISIS against Syria and giving them weapons and medical aid, they're actually, Genie Energy is an oil and gas company that's sucking Syrian oil out of Syrian land in the Golan Heights, which Israel occupies. This company is owned by Rupert Murdoch, and guess what? Also, Kushner is on the board of directors of that company. So Israel has basically an agenda to get America to go to war with Syria and Russia. Netanyahu came to US Congress and he convinced them to go to war with Iraq. Israel, the Zionist lobby, is getting America into all of these wars and getting American people killed. Why? Because they have an idea that if the Jews control Israel, then the Messiah will come. It's an apocalyptic.
No, but I agree with you. And I'm sick of Israel. Hold on a second. And I'm sick. No. Hold on.
ISIS is also an apocalyptic cult that believes that if they take over Damascus, then Jesus or the Messiah will come. Like, it's the same people. They're gunning for the apocalypse. Please go ahead.
But you didn't answer my question. I am in agreement. I'm sick of Israel running our foreign policy. I'm sick of America having to be Israel's big brother and defend them and make sure whatever doesn't happen to them or that they're able to be secular. So again, I ask, okay, you say it would open the table for negotiations. Let's go from there. If America wipes its hands of Israel, you say that opens the table for negotiations. How do you see those negotiations going?
I see them going, Israel has nuclear weapons. I see them going because the Syrian people and the Syrian government are rational actors. They will come to the table and they will say, as they have in the past, they'll say, this is what we want for peace. We want a secular state where everyone is equal and people aren't getting killed just because they're Christian or Muslim. We want the Palestinian right of return, and we want the Syrian land, which was stolen from us, to be returned to us. And then there's no reason for us to have any problem with Israel at all. The only reason that there's a problem is that they're stealing land, they're expanding, and they're being basically genocidal towards anyone who isn't Jewish. And I know that they'll say, oh, we're protecting Christians, or we're, look, we have Arabs that live among us. It doesn't matter. What we see here is reality. It doesn't matter what lipstick you put on it. They are stealing land, they are killing people, and they are supporting terrorism, and the worst kind of terrorism. So the minute that the US stops defending that is the minute they say, okay, you know what? This sounds like a good idea because we have no longer any power to dominate the world and destroy everyone around us.
Okay. Well, I'm going to tell you the conclusion I've come to here is that there is no solution to this. This is never going to stop until everybody dies. I'm not even kidding you, because they're always going to say Israel has to become a secular state, and Israel's never going to do that. You understand that? Israel's never going to do that.
Well, they have to, and the only way that
it's not going to happen. So it's going to be a fight to the death. That's what's going to happen.
Well, I'm sorry. That means that you think that you can't even try that to keep us alive, because Israel doesn't just want Palestine.
I don't want to be involved in that. Oh, no, hold on. I said I want America to wipe its hands of the whole situation. Let them figure it out. Let the Middle East figure out their own problem. We don't need your oil anymore. You know, I mean, I just don't see it, because I agree with you. Okay, let's make Israel a secular state. Sounds great in principle. Good idea. Total freedom, free market. Let's do it. It would never work. Israel would never do that.
Anything about that. The problem is that they're run by religious zealots. That's why they wouldn't do that. And those religious zealots have support.
Now that's a good point. So that's why I say Netanyahu needs to get out.
Well, Netanyahu is a religious zealot, but the problem isn't just him. There's a lot of people that run the show. I mean, Israel is a very segregated society. It isn't just, Muslims, then Christians, then Jews. Even amongst the Jews, they have like a category with people who have been converts are not really considered Jews. They don't have exactly the same citizenship rights. People who have been married and aren't even Jewish don't have any citizenship rights. So basically, they have this ethnocentric state that's based on a religion, not really a race, because there are Black Jews and white Jews and Asian Jews, etc., etc. But the point of the matter is it's not just Netanyahu. He's a terrible human being, of course, and a liar and a thief, and led the U.S. into the Iraq War. But if you remove him, you can replace him with something else. It's the ideology that needs to be fought. It's within Israel itself that people need to be convinced, and some people already are, that it doesn't have to be called Palestine. It can still be called Israel, and you can live there, but you have to live there as equal citizens with the people around you, and that happens to be the Palestinians. And you have to make a peace with the countries around you, and that happens to be Syria, because Saudi Arabia supports Israel. Saudi Arabia has no problem with Israel at all. They pretend they hate Arabs and Muslims, but they have like this underground alliance, this unholy trinity between the U.S., Saudi Arabia, and Israel. And that's why, they're supporting Al-Qaeda and ISIS in Syria, because they prefer, as they said openly, they prefer ISIS to win in Syria. This is the head of Israeli intelligence that said this. Now, you might say it isn't possible. By saying it's not possible to have peace in Israel, it's not possible for Israel to no longer be a Jewish-only or Islamic-only state like ISIS. But I have more faith in the Jewish people than that. I really believe that they can be,
all right. Well, I agree, but you're treading on a thin rope right now, because again, I mean, you admit it. I think Israel would probably be wiped off the map. I mean, you said they don't deserve to exist. A lot of people believe that. One more segment. All right, pull it down, because I want to take all the time here with Syrian Girl. This is a great debate. I really enjoy spirited debate, and I'm glad that Syrian Girl is willing to come on and have this impassionate conversation. So the crew gives me the story. U.S. finalizes deal to give Israel $38 billion in military aid. That's from the New York Times in September 2016. That's ridiculous to me. We've got homeless people here. We've got veterans that need care here. Oh, but then you say, well, if it wasn't for the U.S., Israel would no longer exist. And that may be right, too. But is that our problem? U.S. has spent $2.8 trillion on terrorism fight since 9/11. Well, we don't even know the truth about 9/11, and yet we spend $2.8 trillion since then. All right, Syrian Girl, we've got a short segment here, just 4 minutes. So just what do you want to say here?
I want to say, let's clear things up. You compared the creation of America to the creation of Israel. America isn't still killing Native Americans. America has given Native Americans equal citizenship rights to everyone else. This is not the case for Israel. Israel is still
your point is correct, but I just want to correct the record. I didn't compare them. I was saying, in principle, you can use that same argument. That's all I was saying, but go on.
Okay, sure. And yes, I've heard the argument, and the argument is false for that reason, because the atrocity, the genocide, is ongoing, whereas the genocide of the Native Americans is over. Basically, I'm not saying wipe Israel off the map. I'm saying they should stop wiping Palestinians off the map. These are the people that are getting wiped off the map. They deny the map even existed. We have to go back to the very beginning. How was Israel created? There was the Holocaust in Europe. They made a Havara agreement with Hitler, which said that he would transport the Jews out of Germany. And the Zionists said they wanted Palestine. Why? Because religious reasons. They wanted the Messiah to come, and the only way to do that is to get Israel back. So they immigrated onto boats into Palestine. And let me ask you something. If your country was flooded with immigration, and then some of those immigrants, a minority of them, started creating political violence and terrorism, I'm talking about the Zionist terrorist factions that hung British soldiers in Palestine and shot people in order to get Britain to agree to giving them half of your land. And then they gave them half of your land and created them a country, but didn't even bother to think about creating you a country. And then those same Zionists or ISIS that took over your land and killed you now start, encroaching on the land that was supposed to be given to you by Britain and killing you and taking over your territory. Now, is that something you would take lightly? Is that something you would agree with? Would you agree that illegal immigrants take over your country and steal your land and continue to kill you and your family?
No, of course not. And I'm against that in America. But again, this is something that happened 50 years ago, and trying to correct those mistakes now.
That's the difference. That's the difference. It's happening now. Right now, this very second.
Okay, but so
illegal settlements on Palestinian land. They talk about defending their borders, but they never define those borders. Because to some people, the borders are the ones that were drawn up in 1948 by Britain, then the ones that they took more of in 1967, then the rest say the entire West Bank belongs to them, and then the other ones say that greater Israel belongs to them. What we need to talk about is that who's running the show. You've got the Christian Zionists.
All right, now hold on a second. We've got a minute left. I need to ask you one more question. We got a minute left. Erdogan calls for the Muslim nations to unite against Israel. Now, you say Israel probably wouldn't get wiped off the mat. You have more faith in humanity. What do you make of a statement like that?
Erdogan has trade with Israel. Turkey makes the boots that Israeli soldiers wear. Erdogan says all this stuff to get his people to vote for him in the next election because he's supposed to be the Muslim Brotherhood. And, it doesn't matter what Erdogan said. Erdogan is NATO. I mean, are we really going to listen to him? The only people that are truly fighting Israel or trying to defend against Israel and its expansion is Syria. It used to be Iraq. Libya used to be against them too. And,
and we wiped them off the map.
Central bank. And that's what you keep going back to wipe them off the map.
No, I'm saying we wiped Iraq and Libya off the map because of that reason.
Yes.
No, we're in agreement in this, and this is why we're aiming at Syria and Iran now, because we want to do that same thing so that you have Palestine totally isolated. All right, come on again. We're going to get you on again. This is a great debate, Syrian Girl. You're really good stuff. Follow her on Twitter and YouTube.
You don't agree.
If you are receiving this transmission, you are the resistance.
Survival Shield X2 Nascent Iodine. If you're interested in healthy thyroid, if you're interested in well-being, if you're interested in having a higher IQ, which this has been linked to, get your powerful Survival Shield X2 at InfoWarsStore.com.